For all you mystery fans out there, we have a special treat where today we're speaking with the Stone Cold Crime Writers, and they're going to give us a sneak peek into how setting plays an important part of their process. First up, we have Archer Mayer, whose most recent release is Bomber's Moon.
Hi, I'm Archer Mayer, writer of the Joe Gunther series, and the question of the day is setting. My series of books, over 30 in number at this point, are primarily set in Vermont, all around Vermont. And I did that quite intentionally because although my detective is located obviously in one jurisdiction, I like to take my readers on trips around Vermont and elsewhere. And thank you very much. And never want to feel ignored. Sorry.
It's okay.
Editing is key. In order to do this, I have to do a couple of things. One is to make setting as important as character, and I also need to balance the setting with the plot. Rule number one that I apply to this process is never forget you're a reader first when you're writing. What do you like to read? How do you like to be treated as a reader? The other rule comes from Esther Williams. Never let them see you sweat, which was easy for her because she was always wet. For me, who is rarely wet, I apply the never let you see them sweat, did I say that right, principle by not overdoing things like I'm doing right now. In other words, if you are going to bring the setting to the foreground to give the reader a little background, you want to do so sparingly. You want to do so enticingly. You want to do so in a way that makes the reader enhanced by the setting rather than browbeaten. And so that's the balance that I need to apply and try to apply in my books.
How about your research? Mention that.
Obviously, despite my demeanor, I am not all-knowing and all-seeing. So I have to visit the places that I describe. And I do so not using Google, but by getting in my pickup truck or on my motorcycle and actually going out there, oftentimes in the season or at the time of day or night that I'm describing, because I really want to get the feel of that environment, be it a town or a rural setting or whatever it may be. Thus, sometimes I'll go to Chicago, or I'll go to Newark, or I'll go to New York, outside of Vermont, obviously. And I will make those trips, and I take photographs. So I will stand, in the places I'm describing, so that I can get the feel. Because setting has got to be empirical. It's got to be this sense of how hot or cold is it? Is there a wind? Are there odors? Are there the sounds that you hear, manholes clanking in downtown Manhattan? Why do they make those manholes so noisy all the time down there? Anyhow, point being, you need to reflect that so that people who live in New York, for example, go, oh my God, he really knows about those manhole covers. I know it sounds absurd, but it's astonishing to me how many readers contact me and go, wow, how many months of research did you spend in one of these various places? You really got it right. Oftentimes the key to that is light, not heavy. So catch what's important and let the memories of the locals fill in the blanks, or let the images that you conjure up fulfill the expectations of the reader who's never been to the locale you're describing.
Next up, we have Julia Spencer Fleming, author of the wonderful Claire Ferguson and Russ Van Alstyne mystery series.
One of the reasons location is so important to a writer is for what it can show about a character. Now, it's pretty obvious that characters are in some way created out of their environment. People who grow up in Mississippi have different cultural references and different experiences than people who grow up in Maine. And it's really important to keep that in mind as ways of distinguishing. And what I like to do is use the interaction of characters with their environment, with the setting, to help reveal things about them. It's also a really good way of fixing the location in your reader's head, giving your reader a sense of the vivid reality of the location and the setting without pausing and doing long Thomas Hardy like paragraphs of, here's what the moor looks like. Different people notice different things about their environment. A young person might notice, one sort of thing, an older person something else. An older person in winter might look at the ice and snow and think about the problem with slipping and falling. A younger person might think about sledding and skidding on their boots. And so the way that your character moves through their setting, interacts with it, what they notice about it, should always be done in the service of revealing something about your character. It's another chance to tell the reader what's important in your point of view character. What is it that they notice? What is it that they don't notice? And similarly, a thing that I like to do with language to help reinforce the setting is I like to choose metaphors and similes that reinforce the setting or a particular aspect of the setting. So for instance, my third book, Out of the Deep I Cry, is largely set in and around a reservoir, a pond that had a drowned village underneath it. Very spooky. But water was a recurring theme, and it was an image that I wanted constantly in the reader's head. So a lot of the what I would call, sort of language references are about water. The metaphors have to do with things like water and ice breaking up, and wetness. And that has there's two functions for the reader, right? So one is to, again, remind them, here is your setting. These are where people are. There's a lake, there's a city, it's hot, it's cold. And the other, I should say it has three. The second is, of course, again, to reveal character. And then the third is to reinforce what is that setting or location means in your novel. Because I don't think location should ever simply be the backdrop. I believe that location needs to be a kind of a third type of character in a book. And when you are weaving language that echoes your location into the way you are describing things, into your metaphors, into your similes, you create this wonderful sense of wholeness where the characters reflect the setting, which reflects the language, all in one nice package.
Thanks, Julia. Next up, we have Sarah Stewart Taylor, author of the upcoming The Mountains Wild, to be released on June 23rd.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Stewart Taylor, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today from my home in Vermont and to be partnering with my fellow New England crime writers to talk a little bit about setting and how we approach creating setting and using setting in our crime fiction. I'm the author of The Mountains Wild, which is coming out June 23rd, and I'm also the author of the Sweeney St. George mystery series. And the Sweeney mysteries are set in New England, where I live now. The Mountains Wild is set in Ireland, where I lived for a few years in the mid-90s while I was going to graduate school, and on Long Island, where I grew up. So I think one of the first things about about setting for me is that it's a place. I like to use places that I know well, places that have deep associations for me, and places that I feel confident about reflecting in their entirety. I know sometimes I've tried to write about places that I don't know as well, and they either become idealized or they become a bit villainized in a way. I think you sort of if you don't know the place deeply, it feels a bit one-dimensional. So I think that's one of the first things. One of the challenges of creating really robust sense of setting is that you don't want the setting to sort of take over the novel. I think we've all read novels where it was such a strong character that it was almost like a house guest who wouldn't leave. And I think the way that I like to try to approach that anyway is to use early scenes to really create a strong sense of the setting. Really hit those early scenes. Use action to give your reader a sense of your characters in the setting, and then lay off a little bit and use shorthand or just little echoes of the physical attributes of the setting, or the weather, or the history of that setting, in order to kind of infuse the book with it without making it too big a feature. So those are just a few little tips. Thank you for listening, and good luck writing setting.
Awesome, Sarah. Next up, we have Paul Dwyrin, who has One Last Lie coming out on June 30th.
I'm Paul Dwyrin. I'm the author of the Mike Bowditch series of crime novels, and I want to talk a little bit about how I use setting in my books. In my novels, I read about a Maine game warden named Mike Bowditch, and because he's a game warden, he works outside all the time. I mean, that's his job. And so the natural world is incredibly important to him. And he notices his environment in a way I think that's unusual for most of us who only spend a bit of our lives outside, and he knows a lot as a result. I mean, he can tell you the difference between a striped maple and a swamp maple and a sugar maple. But this isn't just sort of extraneous information that I throw into the books. That I research and decide that I think I can use it to sound like I know what I'm talking about or whatever. Because I think that we often talk about setting being a character in certain books, but I think it might be a little bit different. At least it is for me, which is to say that I think setting can reveal character if used correctly. And you think about somebody like Raymond Chandler and writing the Philip Marlowe novels. We often say that Los Angeles is a character in those novels, but really what we're talking about is Marlowe's perception of the Los Angeles of his time, and what that tells us about him as a character. Yes, we learn all kinds of interesting things about offshore gambling and fancy houses in the foothills and that sort of thing. But ultimately, it's about Marlowe and understanding him and connecting to him so that we can see his world through his eyes. And that's what I try to do with my books too. It's I'm trying to show you the natural world of Maine through the eyes of a game warden, not just in terms of how he goes about his job, but who he is, what he values, um, the fact that he is a bit of a loner and is more comfortable outside on his own than he is with other people. Um, so, when you're thinking about setting, I think you can emphasize it to whatever degree you feel is important. Um, but ultimately, it really does serve, it should, in my view, again, should serve the characters and your characterization. Because ultimately, that's really where readers are going to identify and respond. And I hope this window into my process is helpful and you get something out of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Last up, we have Paula Menier, whose most recent novel was Blind Search.
Hi, I'm Paula Menier, author of the Mercy Carr series, and I'm here in the woods with my dogs, which is where most of my books start, in the woods with the dog. My heroine, Mercy Carr, is a former Army MP who's home from Afghanistan with bomb-sniffing dog Elvis, a fierce Belgian Malinois. They've both got physical, and maybe emotional scars as well from their time in Afghanistan, where Elvis's handler, who was also Mercy's fiance, was killed in battle. So they're home in Vermont, marching off their grief and their guilt in the Green Mountains. I chose Vermont because Vermont is my happy place, and at the time I was living in the Boston area in a very urban environment full of the modern trappings of modern society, and I would escape to Vermont, to the woods, to the mountains. And that's what Mercy does, and that's what Elvis does. And setting the books there gave me a chance for them to heal with the power of nature and wilderness. It also gave me a chance to escape as a writer to a place that I loved. I think setting informs character as it informs plot, especially here in New England, where New Englanders tend to be sturdy, self-reliant people, and I wanted Mercy to be one of those people. And it also presents lots of challenges of actual physical environment, the long winters, the blizzards, the snowstorms, the ice storms, the mud storms, the black flies of May, you name it. There are lots of physical challenges. And so that presents plot opportunities at every turn, and I'm happy to make use of those. By the time I wrote the second book, I'd actually moved to northern New England, to my own piece of woods, and now I have an up-close and personal relationship with the setting that I write about in the books. And that has made all the difference to me as a person and as a writer. So I feel like when Eudora Welty says that you shouldn't be able to set your story in any other place, and if you can, you haven't chosen the right setting, I feel like I've chosen the right setting. That setting does inform my characters and my plot, not just in my fictional life, but now in my real life as well. So I would say that the caveat, if there is one, about choosing a good setting for your story is that you may end up living where you set your stories, so be careful what you wish for.
Fantastic. That was some really great insight from the Stone Cold Crime Writers. Again, those are Archer Mayer, Julia Spencer Fleming, Sarah Stewart Taylor, Paul Dwyrin, and Paula Menier. You can find their work in any bookstore as well as online. We also wanted to give a special thank you to Elder Frost Productions for helping us produce this video.